Yes, so I'm going to talk about orientation on knowledge in the adoption and use of robots in care services. And this is research that I have co-authored with my two colleagues at LUT University in Finland, Satu Pekkarinen and Lea Hennala. So we all live, or we probably all live in aging societies. I don't know about all your countries, but at least the many European countries are aging very rapidly. Finland is among one of the most rapidly aging countries in the world, as well as Japan, at least. And so we have this situation where health and welfare technology are expected to help people live independently and perhaps more healthy lives, and we also expect health and welfare technology to contribute to elderly care by helping the care workers. We can also see that robots have gained many new functions, and the technological development in that field is very rapid, and robots also have improved safety nowadays. So we can expect that they can be used more and more for providing also new types of services, and that includes care. However, when we talk about care services, the application area is very challenging because there are obviously many kinds of ethical issues involved here and also legal issues. And there is also a general lack of knowledge about robots and care robots. So in our research, we have examined knowledge and knowledge building as a central perspective when we talk about introducing care robots into use, when we talk about their use in practice at work and in services, and also when we talk about assessment of care robot use. So in this presentation, I am concentrating on the relation between knowledge and robot technology at the three levels: the micro level, the meso level, and the macro level. So the user perspectives, the organizational perspectives, and the societal perspectives. However, this presentation is quite short in comparison with the chapter, so I've had to select quite carefully what I present today. In fact, for the chapter, we chose the challenging opportunity that was provided to prepare a research synopsis, but it's also quite challenging to squeeze a research synopsis into 30 minutes, so I will try to do my best. What are care robots then? They are defined as partly or fully autonomous machines performing care-related activities for people with physical and/or mental disabilities, and those disabilities may be related to age or other, or let's say, health restrictions in general. They may, for instance, simplify older adults' daily activities of different kinds, such as taking medication, for instance. Or they may improve their quality of life by enhancing autonomy, or perhaps reducing loneliness, and also by providing protection. And an important perspective is also that they can assist care workers in their daily tasks of different types. You can find very many different categorizations of care robots in the literature. Creswell, for instance, divided service or care robots into service robots that take care of, for instance, cleaning or delivery. Then there are surgical robots, telepresence robots that enable participation, or let's say, for instance, contacts between care workers and older adults. Then there are companion robots, cognitive therapy robots, and also robotic limbs and exoskeletons and humanoids. Now, this categorization is perhaps not quite accurate, if I can say so, in terms of humanoids being able to provide several of these other tasks. But anyway, this is one type of categorization that can be found. I also want to talk about who the care robot users are, because that view is often quite narrow, in my view. Or people generally tend to think that it's just older adults, for instance. But we can talk about care robot users in a wide way. So it's clients of different kinds of services, patients, if you like, but also non-clients in this case. And you will see from the presentation why I also mentioned them. So future clients of services. Informal caregivers have an important role, often in care robot use, because when we talk about older adults, for instance, they may need support, they may need reminding, and other types of assistance in care robot use. We are talking about different age groups, very different people, with potentially different illnesses or other special needs. So this is not a homogeneous group of people whom we talk about when we talk about care robot users. It's also important to remember that old age is a very long phase in life. When you compare it with, for instance, childhood, that's relatively short. But old age can begin, well, depending on different definitions. That depends perhaps at around 65 years of age, and then you can live for another 40 years. So you shouldn't, I think that it's important not to talk about, or it's important to remember that it is really long, and there are different subphases, and those different subphases have different implications for care robot use as well, because we talk about different things. If we talk about someone who has recently retired and is in good health, or someone who is perhaps 100 years old and is already very fragile. People with disabilities, care robots can provide very important help for them, and of course, when we mention these disabilities, that's also a very different or wide sphere or wide spectrum of different kinds of disabilities. And again, this has implications for care robot use. Professional caregivers are care robot users, and here also there's a wide variety of different professions. So they may be assistant nurses working in care homes, or they may be, for instance, physiotherapists providing rehabilitation in hospitals. And again, different implications for care robot use. This presentation and our research is also based on thinking about decision makers having a significant systemic role in the society, because when we talk about care robots, it's a question of a very significant digital transformation. So decision makers should also have much more understanding of what we talk about when we talk about care robots, and they should also understand user perspectives. It's quite easy, you can see this in research, but also very much in public discussions, that there is a tendency to kind of slip to quite technology-focused discussions, where you focus on the device first and foremost, and not really its use. And then also potential users' diversity is overlooked. As I mentioned already, there is a wide variety of care robots for different purposes. Sorry about the few words in Finnish actually in the middle, but that's the very well-known SWOT framework. So these are just a few examples of care robots for different purposes on the photos. So for instance, in the upper right-hand corner, you can see exoskeletons, either the ones that help people walk or that help like these smaller ones, the glove-like exoskeleton that helps people grab for instance, a water bottle. Then you can see humanoids. The telepresence robot is at the bottom, this blue one, and also a very interesting rehabilitation robot in the lower left-hand corner that also helps people, for instance, learn to walk again after a stroke. All these different types of robots for very different purposes, they also have their different strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, and I think that's also very important to remember. So actually, when talking about care robots, you should preferably, or it would be good to talk about one specific device and its strengths, weaknesses and opportunities and threats, rather than talking about this wide variety with just one concept. But that's what I'm going to do in this presentation as well. I'm presenting research that consists of mainly qualitative research, field studies, surveys, and those field studies included also co-creation workshops, interview studies, and foresight-related studies in 2 research projects that have recently ended. So in these projects and in this research, we focused on gaining understanding of these different stakeholders, if I can call them so, needs, perceptions and experiences of robots in care, and also the various challenges related to taking robots into use. So the stakeholders include, as I've presented already, these 3 levels: older adults, their relatives and care professionals, and then also various societal stakeholders. What has been characterizing our research is that we have studied long-term actual implementation of robots in authentic care or related environments. You can often see studies of humanoid robots, for instance, that are based on very brief pilots, or very brief ones, even, for instance, 30 minutes of robot use, and then conclusions are drawn. We need all kinds of research. I have nothing against that as such, of course, but we have found it very, very interesting and also useful to really have this opportunity to study long-term actual implementation. And our theoretical background draws on inputs from innovation research. So this shows the projects. One of them was an international one, this first one, and the second one was a very long-term national project, both funded by Academy of Finland. Briefly on the theoretical background, so our research in general draws from systemic perspectives on care, especially elderly care. So innovations most likely are an integral part of the future, and we are interested in the co-evolution of technology or technological innovations and service innovations, studying implementation, use, and impacts. And one, let's say, theoretical basis for the research has been the theories of socio-technical transition. Gilles, for instance, has been writing about this a lot. So new technologies are seen to contribute to broader societal changes. These socio-technical transitions are related to structures, for instance, of elderly care, mindsets of people, and people's practices, and they involve various actors. We are also interested in innovation ecosystems around care robots. So this is also a relatively novel concept that has been brought up in recent years, along with, or let's say, as a continuation of the discussions around business ecosystems. But we see innovation ecosystems as broader ones, including also users, very importantly. Systemic perspectives are, there's a graph here on systemic perspectives that we have utilized. So you can see at the bottom, to the left-hand side, you can see experimental niche innovations. For instance, in this case, welfare technologies such as care robots. So they are these small arrows moving on to the regime level, as Gilles calls it. So this regime level then consists of, in this case, elderly care services. Regime level also contains markets, user wishes, science, industry, culture, policy, and technology. And as time goes by, niche innovations, such as care robots, they challenge the prevailing regime in elderly care services, and then a new regime arises. We are not yet there. I would say that, at least in the Finnish context, we are still in this phase of the small arrows, perhaps challenging the prevailing elderly care regime a little bit, but not very much yet in practice. Then we also have this landscape level, the big picture, and here we can talk about population aging and digitalization and other wider phenomena that then also they exert pressures on the prevailing regime, causing aging, for instance, causes many challenges, obviously, for the elderly care services. But these landscape level developments, they also affect these niche innovations. In the paper, as I said, it's a synopsis of research published after 2019. And there are many studies that are briefly presented. So I just chose actually this first one on the list for this presentation. So I'm just briefly going to talk about this humanoid robot study that we have conducted in public elderly care services. So we've also done research on wearable exoskeletons. We've done a survey on the role of assistant nurses in care robot use, and we have conducted various multi-level studies on the innovation ecosystem, for instance, and interviewed quite a large number of different stakeholders on the 3 levels of the micro, meso, and macro level to study, for instance, socio-technical transition. So this example that I will talk about is a Zora robot that you can see on this photo. So the first Zora robot, this humanoid robot, was taken into use in Finnish public social and healthcare services in early 2016. And we had an enormously interesting opportunity to follow this process right from the beginning, when the purchasing process hadn't even started. So we already monitored or observed how this planning was done, and then all the way to the implementation. And also did a follow-up study later on. On the map you can see where this city is, where the robot was taken into use. And it's used in rehabilitation and recreation in elderly care. So we did a study in 2 phases. The implementation phase, well, first of all, these 2 phases took place in the same environment, so 2 round-the-clock serviced care homes and a geriatric rehabilitation hospital. So the implementation phase lasted for a few months, 4 months about, and the follow-up phase, then the follow-up study was conducted after 3 years of Zora use. It is still in use, so there is quite a long experience already. Quite many interviews were conducted, especially in the implementation phase, and fewer in the follow-up phase. And we studied experienced impacts, facilitating factors, and potholes. I will present some of the results in a rather, let's say, practical way soon, but first a few words about the Zora robot. So that's a very small robot that has been developed especially for use in rehabilitation and recreation. And well, it has typical humanoid characteristics, a speech, it talks, and it hears, it walks, moves its arms when speaking, and also blinks its eyes. So findings from the implementation phase with regard to the older clients were such that the older clients were, generally speaking, quite open-minded and wanted to be engaged. So they felt that it was nice that the robot was brought into their care homes or hospital, and the robot was indeed providing activity and entertainment. They also had a general interest towards novelties and technology, and also topical societal issues, obviously depending, however, on their health condition. People in Finnish care homes are often in already quite fragile health, and it's quite difficult in practice to get into care homes nowadays. There were some technical challenges. The voice of the robot was too low and so on. And also some irritation or confusion. So it depended quite a lot on the person. Care personnel, again, they had quite different reactions in the beginning. So some of them were really interested in novelties, but there was also quite a lot of prejudice and fear. But this decreased when they had the opportunity to try to experience its use. Some of them felt that this robot was just a waste of money, caused additional work when the work is already enormously busy. And it's also important to notice that really it takes resources, it takes time, it takes personnel resources to utilize such a robot. And there was also pottering about using the robot versus true care work, so that was not really seen as part of true care work. However, they felt that the best of the customers was the driver for learning, but that was also used as the justification for negative views. So they felt that this is not in accordance with the best of the customers. We also interviewed managers. They were, for instance, talking about the difficulties in procurement. There is no national coordination on how robots or other welfare technologies are integrated. So those cause difficulties in management. And it would also be necessary to have caregivers who have good technological skills in addition to care skills. You can see some descriptive quotations on this slide. So there were quite different views also among the clients. Go away, this is silly. But then the clients also found new uses for the robot. They suggested that it could rather clean than care. It was also found that people were perhaps more interested in exercising when there was the robot present in the exercising session. Then very briefly about the follow-up study. Expectations had been greater than the benefits. So there were quite important lessons to be learned about the reasons for why the robot was maybe not so well integrated and domesticated. So there was also less use than in the beginning. But on the other hand, where communities became more interested and also generally willing to pilot other robots too. And new interesting challenges had been brought to the care workers' work. So all objectives were not reached. This was clear after 3 years. So it's important to not to try to glue the robot on top of the services, but truly adapt the processes and focus on embedding this novel technology to the work. And focus on consolidating technologies and organizational processes. It's also very important to have a community of users, and here I mean care professionals, so that it's not just one person who is especially interested personally about the device, but have a community within the work community, so that it's something that is our common knowledge. So by presenting in the chapter a compilation of studies on these different levels, I just could present this one example here. We elaborate on the relation between robot technology and knowledge, and our aim is to provide a more systemic view into knowledge related to care robot use. So we propose that there is a need to shift the focus from mere training that we see as provision of information to a more comprehensive understanding of processes and actions towards knowledge building in this area. So we think that this is really the prerequisite for getting benefits out of care robot use. Therefore, we propose orientation to care robot use as a key issue at the different levels, again, in homes, workplaces, and societies. And this is defined as a continuous co-creative process of introduction to technology use and its familiarization, including learning of multifaceted knowledge and skills for its effective use. And we see this as complementing existing technology acceptance and diffusion models that very interesting ways, of course, focus on different stages of technology adoption. However, we really focus with this particular concept, we focus on the dynamic processes and actions at different levels. So on the how question, how can adoption and acceptance and meaningful use of care robots be facilitated? So we believe that this is inherently a social action taking place among orientation givers and orientation receivers. So people often have even dual roles in orientation. And it's in fact an action of orientating oneself and others, a continuous process, not a one-time activity, not a question of a training session when a device is brought into use. And so this is important to know. It's more than initial training. And it's also very important to absorb critical views and questioning attitudes. And just a few words. Yeah. So this orientation or the doing part, if you think about innovation literature and doing using interacting mode, for instance, this doing part is very important in our definition. So it's again not one-sided, one-way training, provision of information, but co-creation. And we also should consider different kinds of practical orientation pathways, the why, what, who, and how aspects of orientation. We produced a guide and an associated video on orientation on the basis of our results. You can find it on the project website of Orient. The guide includes information on, for instance, different stakeholders' tasks in orientation. And why are we then talking about all this? So the last 3 lines here. We want to advance better understanding concerning the preconditions of care robots improving older people's life, contribution and social engagement. And we also have wanted to provide practical information to, for instance, care professionals in an easily understandable way concerning how to deal with current and future shortcomings in care robot use. And it's also important for us to inform policy making with our research. Thank you.